Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Staff Spotlight video series. Today we'll be interviewing John Ferrell. John Ferrell is currently the Program Manager for Feedstocks in the Biomass Technologies Office. Mr. Ferrell has received several major awards for his work in the biomass industry. He was given the Bioenergy Engineering Pioneer Award by the American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers for the development, administration, and promotion of bioenergy. He was also awarded the Raphael Katzen Award at the Symposium for Fuels and Chemicals for distinguished contributions to deployment and commercialization of fuels and chemicals production from renewable feedstocks. Last year, during Public Service Week, Dr. David Danielson, Assistant Secretary for Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, named Mr. Ferrell as a recipient of the Energy Rockstar Award. Mr. Ferrell will be interviewed by Dr. Cyd Hamilton, a AAAS fellow who joined the office in the fall of 2012.
All right, so that was certainly a worthy introduction to you, John Ferrell, and it allows me to segue nicely into my first question for you, which is about your overarching goals. What have they been for the Biomass program?
That's a very difficult question in a way, since I've been involved for so long. And many of my goals have been met, I think. I'm very appreciative, really, of the various opportunities that the Department of Energy has given me over the years. I began really in the feedstock program as the manager many years ago, 1986, and the program was in its early stages, really. We were still screening different plants, different varieties, which ones might have the most potential, that sort of thing. And after a series of tests and trials and things like that, we finally honed in on a couple that we called kind of national models. And that included the switchgrass on the herbaceous side and the hybrid poplars. And we have seen those models being used for the last 20 years. Those models are still being used in the U.S. as major crops. And others have been added. And we never had the funds, really, to pursue. That's sort of why we had to focus in on one or two. But that's been great. And during one stretch in my tenure here, I was the director of the Office of Fuels Development for 7 years. And during that time, we built the process, or the pilot demonstration unit at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. We ran a major national feedstock program out of Oak Ridge National Lab. And we conducted initial work with the enzyme companies that led to an R&D 100 award. And we also had the first step at trying to commercialize these technologies. It was a little too early, I think, but we learned a lot from that, and many of the companies and technologies that we were involved with early on are come back. They've been proved, science has developed, and things are much better.
All right, my next question you've partially answered, but I want to make it twofold as a result. So are there specifics during your tenure here that you care to expand upon in terms of this vision for the biomass program as a whole, and how have you approached public perception specifically of renewables and biomass?
Wow, that's a big question.
Yes.
So, in terms of from the kind of the political side, I think one of the advantages and one of the real, I think, values of the bioenergy biomass area is that if you kind of go back even to the beginning of the Department of Energy, the focus was on energy security. And the oil shocks, the oil imports were an issue, and the stability of that oil supply and where that source was coming from. And so we always had the support of what you might call, military hawks, which is an interesting group to support a renewable technology. We always had the support of the rural community, and if you look at the political landscape, that helps a lot in terms of getting a bipartisan support. And there have been other groups, trade associations, others that have helped us along. And to say nothing for USDA and their support, and particularly rural development, because of the jobs that would be created. And more recently, obviously, the global climate issues and greenhouse gas reductions and how biomass could fit into that. It's kind of the renewable kind of trump card is that biomass is the only only technology that has real potential as a liquid transportation fuel substitute. And so that will always, I think, as long as we depend on gasoline and petroleum products, that will always be part of our portfolio. So I'm very bullish on the future of the biomass program. And actually, if you look at my career and kind of where it's been, and you're kind of thinking of a book on biomass technologies and where that might go. I would say that we've had several good chapters already. We've developed technologies and so forth. But really the best is yet to come. The chapters that are coming forward, in part because the science is developed, because that we do have a great need in this country for renewable energy and biofuels. I think that's going to go further. Probably the area that I would be most frustrated with, I guess, to some degree, would be the issue of public perception, particularly with the biomass technologies. One time I was quoted in the Wall Street Journal as saying that compared to solar and wind, biomass was just not sexy enough. But yet it had value. It even from a power standpoint, it had value. It was not an intermittent energy source. It was basically carbon on the stump. It could provide baseload technologies. I think the real advantage, though, in terms of biomass deployment and getting biomass technologies out there, is that it can be very impactful on the landscape. And you can look at that either from a positive or a negative way. If you start looking at resources and deploying biomass, I think there are a number of opportunities. If you look at the Forest Service and how it became to be, it really wasn't for timber production. It was really for flood protection, trying to alleviate flooding problems. And so biomass can be used that way, particularly the perennials, the ones that have roots that can absorb nutrients, that can improve the water quality, that can reduce the sediment load. Being able to place those on the landscape has a huge value. And then I think there's the whole issue of being able to utilize waste resources in the biomass stream of things. So if you look at forest fires and the overloading, the fuel loading problems in the West, and being able to utilize that resource, alleviate the problems, improve growth, reduce forest fire impacts, potentially that's a huge value. Municipal solid waste, again, an opportunity. The beetle kill trees out there. There are lots of opportunities, I think, that can be realized through the proper stewardship and development, kind of from a systems landscape approach. How can you go out and deploy these technologies? How can you solve waste problems at the same time? How can you support the energy future, the renewable energy future? So it has I think the public sells us short. But we do have public support, but I think it could be stronger, and we just need to get those messages out.
Okay, so you're bullish about the future. You've answered many questions about that. My next question was basically about where do you see the future, and in some ways you've highlighted what the future goals need to be for the biomass program. But previously in conversations, you've also mentioned invasives as a tool that can be utilized.
Very true.
Yeah.
So another problem would be invasive species, which unfortunately we've sort of, in many cases, brought the problem on ourselves. But not that we want to support the development of more invasive species or anything like that, but being able to utilize invasive species where they have dominated landscapes and pull those into biomass operations so we can actually utilize that resource, produce energy, and help solve that problem.
Yeah, so it's a mitigation. Right?
Mitigation, and helps alleviate the costs of doing this. And I think that's, I guess, the other thing that we haven't been able to fully recognize, although we have seen some indications of that through the Energy Independence and Security Act, where, in the whole development of the RINs, or the value that you can place on biofuels that would be developed by renewable resources, and taking advantage of some of those environmental advantages and actually being paid for it, carbon trading, whatever might be developed along those lines. So there are lots of opportunities, I think, as the public gains a stronger support for this technology, because it does have many values beyond just the economic ones.
Right, yes. It's multifaceted, and it would be nice if the message...
Yeah, and I think that's, the other thing, is just the versatility of the biomass technologies. And biomass is that it's almost the similar, if you had to kind of look at what the corollary might be, it would be fossil energy, because you could use it as a liquid, a solid, as a gas. You can produce fuels and power and products and food and fiber, all from biomass. And if you go back far enough, obviously biomass was the major energy source in the country. And if you think in terms of, obviously, geological terms, all fossil energy was derived from biomass as well. So with all that strong story, you would think that we would have we would be way up there at the top. And I think in my mind, we are, but we just need to get that story out there.
Yes, especially with the addition of the sustainability aspect, which fossil fuels does not have. So is there anything you'd like to add in closing? You have such a long tenure and historical knowledge of the system. Any last?
Well, Dr. Hamilton, what can I say? I think I've had it's been a great ride. I've enjoyed my work here in the Department of Energy. I'm certainly invigorated by the young talent that's been brought into the office and the future that holds, and the science that has been developed, and the engineering, and kind of pulling everything together in the science and the engineering, and looking down the future. So I think it's very bright future, and I wish the department, the Biomass, well as they proceed. And I'd like to thank you for the interview and wish you the best in your career development.
Thank you very much, John Ferrell. It's been a pleasure to have the opportunity to interview you. I think the development, the work that you've done to sustain and ensure that this legacy of yours continues is something that the entire nation can thank you for. And I do not say that lightly.